All right. So yeah, we're going to briefly go over the project that was started last winter and the process that we went through to modernize our heavy snow criteria across the region, across the CONUS. And then what the plan is for this upcoming winter and then the following subsequent winter as well. So if you remember back, we asked everyone to evaluate their heavy snow criteria for their CWAs. And then we proposed a new heavy snow criteria that was a little bit more seamless across the country. So the reason we were doing that is, this wasn't so much an issue across Central Region, but there were some discrepancies as we went, especially along the regional borders with the heavy snow criteria. So it prevented more of a kind of a continuous smooth look across the country. Some offices were using different criteria to determine their heavy snow criteria. So this project was, this initiative was an attempt to kind of smooth those out, move from the segmented 12 and 24-hour criteria to more of an event-based criteria, and then have something that's at least timing and geospatially consistent across the country. And that'll in turn make downstream processes a little bit more consistent, such as the WPC, WSO, and then our watch issuance as well. So why change our criteria in the first place? Well, like I said, we worked through this process internally, and thank you all for your efforts in that. You reached out and talked to your partners and customers and got feedback and made sure that the new criteria made sense for your area, for your CWA. That map there on the right-hand side is the proposed heavy snow criteria for moving forward. So this upcoming winter, we're going to evaluate that. The new criteria was largely about the same across most areas. If you did see changes, it was likely only about an inch or two from your previous criteria. So hopefully the changes were not largely impactful to your partners, but hopefully will provide a better service. So like I mentioned, in this upcoming winter, we're going to be evaluating that with the goal of finalizing that for the following winter and then implementing that for winter 23-24. So what are we asking everyone to do this upcoming winter? For Central Region offices, please still use your existing criteria that's outlined in the Directive 10-513. So nothing's really changing from the previous winter. What we are asking you to do is simply look at the new criteria when you do issue headlines, and then just compare those two values. Would the new criteria have changed your decision making for the event? The timing have differed? Would the new criteria have changed your efforts in messaging to your partners? Things like that. And keep in mind that it's not only the snow amounts, but also the timing. So again, we're moving away from the 12 and 24-hour time frames into an event-based criteria. So just keep that in mind as well. And if you do have feedback after evaluating that for an event, we do have a feedback form linked there in the slides. We've also sent that out via email. And if you need some referencing material, there's some briefing slides linked there as well, and then some internal comms documents if you need to communicate that with partners if they have questions on why things are changing in your area. For awareness, every region is kind of taking a little bit of a different approach. So I believe Eastern and Western are actually going to be using the new criteria for this upcoming winter in their decision making, where Central and Southern, I believe, are using the legacy and then evaluating kind of behind the scenes. So you may see some regional differences along your border. We recognize that. So if you have some collaboration issues, just try to work through those the best you can. We understand if there's some discrepancies along the borders. In addition, WPC is going to be using the new criteria for their WSO. So if you're using that for guidance in your decision making, just keep that in mind that it's going to be using the new criteria. So you may also see some discrepancies there. So I think that's all I have for an overview and review of the heavy snow criteria initiative. So again, just as a review, just continue to use the legacy criteria for this upcoming winter, and then just evaluate that on a case-by-case basis and supply your feedback in the feedback form. So at this point, I can toss it over to Alex to discuss WPC side for this upcoming winter.
All right, thanks, Derek. I will get my slides up here. While we're transferring the screen here, I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Alex Lamers. I'm the warning coordination meteorologist here at the Weather Prediction Center. And I've been here for a few years now, WCM for a few years. And let me just see, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. So I'm going to be focusing mostly on collaborating on winter weather. And if you want details on the actual operation of the WPC Winter Weather Desk, I would recommend viewing the traditional webinar that we do with the Warning Decision Training Division every winter. There should be a recording of that. I'm not sure of the exact status of that, but if you can't find it, let us know. All the live versions have already occurred. The other option is to reach out with direct questions, or you can schedule a one-on-one meeting with us. And we've actually had quite a few of these with WFOs already. We really think those are super productive, being invited into your preseason workshops and training sessions. Really valuable time to maybe target our presentations to specific questions you have, and have a little bit more time for Q&A and back and forth. And I like to show this whenever I'm talking about consistency or collaboration, or how our forecasts reach the public, because I think with winter weather in particular, the public receives winter weather forecasts in a lot of different ways, right? There are so many snow forecasts and snow maps out there. And you see it from internally. I mean, we don't publish the WPC snow and ice externally, but there are two different snow and ice forecasts with what NDFD is doing. Then there's different networks. The different networks in individual cities will have different forecasts, and the national networks will have different forecasts than their affiliates, and there's different colors and ranges. So it can get a little confusing, right? And I think what we're maybe focusing on this talk, and I think that's something good for us to continue to work on in the next several years, is ways that we can offer a little bit more consistency on our end. And so I'm going to talk a bit about two modes of collaboration today, the CFP and then also the calls that we do. So real quick though, the Winter Weather Desk, we did change that from a rotation of 4 to 5 forecasters. I think it was last winter. And now that allows for almost around the clock coverage during the winter. So basically anytime that you reach out, there will be somebody there monitoring winter weather across the CONUS. And there is a bit more overlap in the afternoon, which is when we tend to see a bit more collaboration requests. And there's the number is right here, but you can reach us in AWIPS chat as well. And a lot of you are probably familiar with the general forecast process that we use, but basically there's a couple of different dials that we can dial up the snow and ice forecast with these various components. There's the precipitation magnitude, or QPF, and then there's things that are roughly associated with the temperature profile, and that's true of snow and ice. And this is basically broken down into two different forecasters. So there's a QPF forecaster who's working on the liquid equivalent, and then there's a Winter Weather Desk forecaster who's working on the prob of weather type and the snow liquid ratio. And of course, the ice liquid ratio comes from the FRAM technique, a simplified FRAM technique, to get snow and ice. And of course, the QPF forecaster is now subject to the CFP demonstration that we're doing now. And I think the key thing here is that these forecasters work in tandem, and they're going to be able to sync up their changes much more easily when we receive collaboration comments around the same time. So keep the QPF CFP timelines in mind when you want to talk snow and ice. And this is the timeline, the simplified graphic that was recently published and presented in a national webinar, but from the PMO folks. I guess it's called CMU now. And I just sort of tried to annotate on here when specifically there's winter weather considerations. So you'll see the two main collaboration windows here. there's the early window and the late window, and this is not to scale, right? So notice the early window is about 3 hours long, and the late window is a little over an hour long. So much more compressed at the end. And then in the middle here, we have when the prelim WPC QPF is issued. So we do think it's a good idea to set the table early and include thoughts on snow and ice if you can. At the same time, you're talking QPF. That really, again, that helps those two forecasters work together and make those changes for you. And then for the late window, so the prelim QPF, it actually is sent by our forecasters by 1730 or 0530 Z. It should arrive to you a little bit after that. And there's about a 15-minute period. So shortly after the QPF is arriving to you is when the WWD will issue their forecast. So they have about 15 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes, depending on when the QPF is sent and finalized, to run their final checks on snow and ice. So there's a lot happening on the winter weather desk right around this time. And then, of course, it takes a lot of time to kick off all these other processes. So PWPF, the probabilistic snow and ice, and the winter storm outlook, and all of that starts to arrive around this 1815Z timeframe. And then we target winter-related calls right around 0630, 1830Z. We're really threading the needle there, right? Because we have to turn around and get any QPF changes in under the CFP now by 7Z and 19Z. We can't push that call time much later, or we wouldn't really have time to incorporate any feedback you might have. We can't push it much earlier because we need time to actually run all those winter weather processes. So that hopefully that makes that a little bit more clear in terms of how, you know, we don't have a formal CFP for winter weather, but we don't have a formal CFP for winter weather, but they are related. One thing that I did want to mention real quick is in the issue of NDFD consistency, and the fact that there's downstream ramifications for national level products like WSSI. So obviously WSSI is based on the NDFD forecast, and so it will, any inconsistencies between offices will show up and can create some issues when partners are using the forecast. And so this is this example here is not to pick on one or two offices. We see these types of issues in more than one place. But it can prompt calls and inquiries from senior government leaders. Like this particular example, we did get contacted from the FEMA National Watch because they do use that to for some of their situational awareness maps. They use WSSI. And the other consistency element, I think, is between WPC and NDFD. I know that there's nothing that says they have to be exactly aligned. Again, we don't have a CFP for winter weather yet. There's you know, but they do all affect, they do both affect down products downstream. So you know, national level partners often use national level viewers, like you see here, this Jim Cantori tweet. So local edits of the deterministic forecast or PWPF would introduce an inconsistency potentially. And of course, WPC forecast sets the mode of the winter storm ensemble. So that drives additional products such as the winter storm outlook and probabilistic WSSI. So if there's differences and a gap there between what WPC has in our forecast and NDFD, there is potential for those messaging inconsistencies. So a real quick summary before I get into the collaboration call stuff. So I would say early collaboration on snow and ice to mimic the QPF CFP isn't required. But it would be extremely helpful if we get those comments in early. And the WWE forecaster is going to be under a lot of time pressure right around the time that the QPF is finalized, 5:15 to 5:45Z and 17:15 to 17:45Z. We're generally aware that QPF edits that may in the warm season be considered insignificant can be quite important when winter weather precip types are expected. So we are prepared for an increase perhaps in collaborative QPF comments. You know, I think all of our forecasts that we're doing, the NDFD snow and ice and WPC WWD forecasts, they feed into a lot of other products. So as much as we can align those would be a good thing. Getting into the collaboration call angle. So we're continuing to do those on Google Meet. From what we understand, folks like that. The time can vary, but generally speaking, we're going to try to slot them in around 0630 and 1830Z. The thing that will be a little different this winter is that we're going to be focusing collaboration on the time frame of watch decisions. So WPC is going to target our NIMNAT alerts and calls when we have 3 or more adjacent WFOs that may feel like it's time for a watch now, or there might be significant changes to existing watches. So that can either come from WPC via our examination of the winter storm outlook or other things like that, or it can come from WFOs or ROCs. If you're chatting in AWIPS chat and there's a few offices that say, all right, I think it's time that we entertain winter storm watches, that may be the impetus for a call. And the main strategy here is trying to avoid repetitive calls. With several dozen WFOs, having days and days and days of calls. And that's really a response to feedback. I know not everybody may necessarily feel that way, but I think we were trying to really focus more on critical decision timeframes. And non-watch related calls are still possible, of course, driven by difficult or unusual forecasts, and I'll get into that in a bit. So what you'll see on most calls, we're going to try and have this little lead-off slide that gives you the bottom line up front, the main takeaways. And then you'll also see a lot of ensemble data, the winter storm outlook, probabilistic WSSI. We may use that to generate these suggested watch area grids and anything else that might help describe the meteorological problem of the day. And it'll tend to lead off with a WPC overview and any watch collaboration, and then go to the ROCs for messaging coordination if it's a daytime call in particular, or if they're staffed overnight. And I think on the next slide, yes, I get into the suggested watch area. So this winter, we're going to have a static image that's already available here. That what you'll see now is like a test image from last winter, but we're working on getting that updated for live events and a dynamic zoom and pan map for WFO use. So this is what we're doing with the collaborative winter storm watch experiments for this winter with ATAN sites. This is the type of grid that we generate and deliver to those offices, and they can ingest it. However, for most of you, and outside of those defined negotiated experiment windows, that will not be necessarily delivered or something that you need to ingest. So really, most of you are going to be just looking at this sort of thing as a table setter for conversation. It's something where we get on the call, we sort of have an area that we can start with. And it allows folks to say, I think that looks about right, or I'd trim another row of counties from that, or can we add such and such city or county? And hopefully that'll make the conversation more efficient than talking about things in generalities or that sort of thing. So that is that. And I just did want to give you an example of the typical flow before I wrap up. So this is an example from last winter. You can see there's some low probabilities here in the Midwest exceeding warning criteria, about 4 days from when this was issued. So basically in this case, nobody would have been interested in a call. And this is the Wawa map at the conclusion of this particular shift. So anything would be collaborated in chat at this point. And again, we're not trying to shut off collaboration by focusing calls on watch decisions. It's just that probably we would direct more of that conversation to chat. And then on the next shift, on the day shift, you can see the probabilities are starting to grow. So perhaps there'd be a little bit more concern. Maybe we either see some initial conversation in AWIPS chat from the WFOs, or maybe we reach out to maybe like the Omaha and Des Moines offices to take the temperature a bit and say, hey, what are you thinking? Nobody's ready for watches yet, so collaboration would continue in chat over the forecast itself. And then you can see on the following night shift, so this is the second night shift, there is a significant ramp up in probabilities, and in this case, WPC thinks, yeah, we should probably have a call. maybe the offices are on board as well. So we gather everybody up and have a call for this larger region of probabilities. And so this would be a good case of, we're trying to target for when we're making critical decisions, which would be a watch in this case. So some of the offices on the call may opt to issue watches, others wouldn't. Again, that gets to the point that watches are still a WFO decision, right? WPC is just trying to help frame the conversation in an efficient way. And then on the following shift, you can see maybe you would have a follow-up call just to see how far northeast do we want to go with these, since they opted not to issue on the previous call. So it might be a smaller, more targeted call. Some of the offices might have 2 consecutive calls in that case, but for the most part, other offices wouldn't necessarily be directly contacted for a call. So to summarize, I think we're trying to focus the calls on a critical decision time frame, trying to reduce the number of collaboration calls overall, and target it for times when they really matter. So most WFOs would only receive a NIMNAT, and again, you're going to receive the NIMNAT if it's likely you would be an active participant. You're actually considering watches. Anybody could get the Google Meet link and listen in, of course, but this is really for active participation. We'll still be collaborating on every shift, again, so this is just moving more of the conversation into chat. And again, you can still listen into calls, and I just mentioned that. And real quick, one last thing. Again, we don't necessarily have to be talking about watches to have a call. This is just some examples of some theoretical cases where it might be beneficial to still have one. So you may want to coordinate special messaging. Doesn't have to be snow squalls. I'm just using this as an example here. Maybe a regional scale snow squall outbreak. It would be good to dial up a call, talk about how are we going to reflect this in all our products, because we don't have something like a snow squall watch or snow squall outlook, right? So that might be beneficial. Maybe situational upgrades, coordinating, like you're in the middle of an event and it becomes apparent that you need blizzard warnings over multiple CWAs. Lining that all up in an efficient way might be another reason, or maybe a complicated forecast with a lot of uncertainty that just would benefit from a discussion. And so here's some points of contact if you want to reach out to us. My email is there, but you can also reach out to Greg Carbon, who's our branch chief, and Tony Fracassa, who's our winter team lead. And with that, I guess, Phil, I'll let you decide whether we need to move on or if we have time for questions.